It's happening the mission 46, organized by Space Analog Station Habitat Marte. And today we'll have the presentation of Mariam Naseem about the power station. Thanks so much, Mariam, for your interest and support, and about to be a volunteer and about to be doing this presentation today, okay? You are welcome to start your presentation. Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Professor Julio. It's my pleasure participating in a previous mission and presenting today to everyone. So I was in charge of the power station on mission 42, I believe, and we were supposed to look at the general functions of the facility, possible design concepts, technologies to build the infrastructure, and then thinking about the duties as a power station chief. Additional information I've included this time is about supporting positions in the power station and what resources they might need in terms of food, water, etc., how the power station can contribute to food production. And then in this case, the mission scenario was there's a Martian dust storm and different researchers are isolated in their different facilities. So what activities are they going to be performing? In my case, what do I do in a dust storm in the power station? What are my recommendations for other facilities and guidelines for life on Earth? So with that, the general function of the facility to generate power through various primary and backup sources, ensuring that life support systems have stable power is critical. And then I work with other facilities to ensure they also have adequate power supply for operational needs. So fuel cells and solar battery packs are needed for EVAs, extravehicular activities, and that's the job of the power station. Also exploring sustainable and regenerative power generation techniques for long-term and long-duration missions on Mars, conducting research and testing of innovative technology, and then if anything fails, for example, the life support system or food production capabilities, you need to help out with that, and also train other facilities in ways to generate and use the different power sources safely. So training and safety is also the job of the power station. Here, I constructed a possible design concept, keeping in mind also that a person might be required to stay in the power station for extended duration. So we have the habitation areas, the dining area, exercise, hygiene, habitation module. And then there's a life support system for the entire facility. We have a food production module that's supported by solar arrays. We talk about a repair and maintenance area, the R&D lab, communications equipment is required. And then we have a power generator that's a nuclear fission reactor. This might be a bit long-term because you have to figure out how to use the radioactive sources safely, store them and use them safely. Then we have the solar array complex for power generation and transmission lines to the other facilities from the power station. Here I have a storage area for batteries, fuel cells, and then the propellant storage tanks. So suppose we find water ice like they found on the moon. You basically can convert it into liquid oxygen and liquid hydrogen and put it in propellant tanks, and this can also be stored in the power station. Here I talk about technologies to potentially build the infrastructure. So for the facility, you could use 3D printing. Some companies are proposing inflatable structures and modules, regolith additive manufacturing using robotic systems. You need solar arrays, so high power, high voltage. And if it's autonomously deployable, that's best. So perhaps you don't have to go outside in harsh conditions like a Martian dust storm. Regenerative fuel cell systems. So this could include the fuel cell stack and an electrolyzer to convert it into the different components for power or water generation. And then here we have the nuclear fission, which would be the basis of the power plant proposed. This is actually based on an effort by NASA called the Kilopower Project, and they're looking at preliminary concepts and technologies to develop fission nuclear power system for future long-duration missions. And then here, this is from one of their Mars roadmaps from NASA. So they talk about the deep space suit, what it might require. We need in-space cryogenic acquisition and propellant storage, and enhanced reliability life support. So different components and systems on the, for example, the EVA suit and life support systems, they need to be able to sustain minor failures, and it should be easy to detect this and fix it, because shipping backup components from Earth is going to pretty much not be an option because it will take too long. And next generation surface mobility, so things like pressurized rovers for the EVAs and ones that might be able to autonomously operate in the Martian environment. We already talked about the fission power and communication systems. Here I talk about the duties of the power chief, so performing daily operational checks on the power generation systems, including the solar arrays, looking at making sure the life support system is operating accurately, transmission lines are working. So say in this case, there is a Martian dust storm, so you probably need to go outside in your rover and inspect the transmission lines to make sure that they haven't been damaged, and recharging the battery packs and fuel cells on a daily basis for different tasks that other facilities need to perform, and keeping reserve fuel sources in case there's like an emergency mission, conducting troubleshooting and repair with other facilities, and continuing to do research on other power generation techniques. Here I talk about some additional positions and resources. So it would be good if there's a power station assistant along with the chief in case that there's an emergency, so as a backup, and also to provide that sort of it's good to have a teammate to talk to. So in case of emergencies, and then making sure that batteries and fuel cells, propellant tanks are working accurately. The food and water requirements for the chief and assistant. So this is an interesting table I found. It's from a document. The source is down there. It's called a NASA baseline values and assumptions document. And they look at different long duration missions and propose some of the requirements that need to be met for such missions. So here they looked at the diets that might be needed for long duration mission. And it's interesting because they look at all the different like crops you might need to be eating. And this, like the columns, they're separated. So there's like the first one is for a 10-day cycle, the first column. Then the second one is for a 20-day cycle. And the third one is also for a 10-day cycle, but I guess it's proposed by another research team. And this, like, if you want to understand like the terminology, CM-D, like that's basically kilograms per crew member day. So each day they would require these dietary requirements. And then the water, they talk about basically, I guess in the first column, if it's a 10-day cycle, they would need like 1.1581, so like 1.2, I guess, kg each day of water, each crew member a day. So this is interesting. I would recommend you read this document if you're interested in understanding this better. And here I say that, okay, initially food will need to be supplied from Earth in bulk and smaller form factors. So you need freeze-dried food, dehydrated food, etc., because the capability to actually produce food on Mars will be limited initially. So you need supplies before you get to the point where you can produce food on Mars. And in the future, you could do experiments in your greenhouse, so the one that has solar arrays, and maybe one day start to think about like planting crops in the Martian soil, though this might be a very difficult task because we don't know today the condition of that soil and if it can actually sustain growth of food. And then how can the power station contribute to food production? So we propose a closed loop food production module. There needs to be an air filtration system, a growth chamber, light assembly. So these could be LEDs, and an environmental control system. You could start with like an aeroponic system, and in the future you could think about aquaponics, sensor technologies for maintaining the optimal nutrient gradients. And you could breed different plants in controlled environments and see how they perform, while also making sure that they're not contaminated by, microbes or other harmful bacteria, etc. Here I found something called solar agrivoltaics, which is interesting because in the same area under the solar panels, like based on, I guess, their angle, you try to co-locate food production underneath the solar panels. So you're using the same stack for power production and food generation. New technologies to develop solar arrays. So NASA is exploring perovskite solar cells. This is an alternative to current silicon solar cells used today. It's a new discovery. It's a good conductor of electricity. And the interesting thing is it can be transported to space in liquid form, and then you could print it onto panels on Mars. Vertical farming, so to optimize space, you could have different racks stacked on top of each other. And we were talking about in our last mission, like perhaps different types of glass or membrane that allows the desired light or wavelength through while blocking out the harmful radiation. Here, So the activities during the dust storm, ensuring the backup and emergency power system are functioning correctly and assisting other facilities with troubleshooting of critical issues. You need to redirect power to life support systems to make sure those critical systems are functioning properly and mitigate the effects of dust storms. So we talked about maybe cleaning the solar panels, the thermally shielded glass membrane, inspecting the transmission lines to make sure there's no damage, and continuously talking to other facilities to make sure there's a constant line of communication in case there are any issues, and work with engineering to develop a protocol for transferring the propellant tanks and the fuel cells. So basically, they'll be sending their mobility systems or rovers over to you, and then you make sure that you have stuff ready for them in this critical emergency. So my recommendation for other facilities would be to establish daily protocols for updates so that that continuous line of communication is maintained. And basically, they need to inform other facilities immediately if there are critical issues with life support or power production, environmental controls, these critical systems. Other facilities need to be following the power generation and battery handling safety procedures and contact the power station immediately if there are any issues with the power supply. So I guess you can say constant communication and talk to other facilities if you need help troubleshooting any technical issues. And here was the last slide about guidelines for life on Earth. So how can we take this example and think about living on Earth during isolation and COVID? So you could maintain a regular schedule, maintain physical fitness through daily exercise, focus on your personal development and hobbies, and maintain frequent contact with friends and family. For power and energy related activities, you could consider using energy efficient heating and lighting. And there are a lot of smart devices today that can be installed in your home with timers and motion sensors that can detect when you're in the house and when you leave to help with this. And stay up to date on the latest technologies and interesting things happening. And that's it. Thank you.